Here are Matt Hatfield and Coach Ed Young.
And we're back here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk on Cova Sports TV. Like, share, and subscribe wherever you may be tuning in on our YouTube channel, all over the web, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, IG, X at 757 Sports Talk. And then we've got a special guest with us. He is the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. You can check out his fabulous work in the rtdrichmond.com. Give him a follow as well on X or Twitter. Still people call it that. By David Teel. We say hello to our pal, David Teel. David, how's the summer been for you? And did you and the Teel clan make any special trips around the globe? I know you're a world traveler like Ed is. So anywhere you go in particular during the summer months?
First of all, gentlemen, good morning. Happy week 0. For those who celebrate, and yes, thanks to Jill Teel, we had an awesome spring vacation in late May to Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Grand time, just seeing some breathtaking sights and doing some hiking and closing it out with a Giants-Phillies game in San Francisco.
Oh, nice. Who won that one?
Oh, the Phillies crushed them.
Phillies crushed them. All right. Well, I tell you what, I'm jealous of you and Ed, who's been the world traveler this summer. Now that he's retired from teaching, remains to be seen if he'll still be coaching. And even Harry Minium, who we had on a few weeks ago, one of your comrades, who's been all over the world too, and he's been overseas. I haven't made any trips this summer except to the pool. That's been my vacations. So
hey, the pool's all right, man.
It's not bad. It's not bad. But I want to begin with you, and Ed will jump in here in a moment. Dublin today. Florida State snubbed from last year's college football playoff as life for Mike Norvell's Seminoles begins post-Jordan Travis. They take on a Yellow Jackets team that many feel will be improved. Ordinarily, DT, I would say this is not a game I'm juiced up for, but I'll be around the telly because college football, it's here, and we've been deprived of the sport for 6-7 months now, and I'm game. What says you?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a sneaky good game, Matt. Georgia Tech with Haynes King, a dynamic quarterback who transferred in a couple of years ago from Texas A&M, had a game down there in College Station where they beat Alabama. His primary area to improve is ball security. He threw it away 16 times to the other squad a year ago, and that needs to change if the Yellow Jackets are to take the next step under Brent Key. And I was listening to Reese Davis on a podcast recently. He came up with this nugget. Under Brent Key, Georgia Tech is 4-0 against ranked ACC opponents. So beware DJU and Florida State.
So this could be part 2 potentially of last year's surprise and shocker. I didn't see it coming, but Ed kind of warned me that Duke could knock off Clemson a year ago to start the season. Didn't see it coming. So this one could go down the wire in your eyes, potentially.
Yeah, I think the big key, Matt, is Florida State is really good on the offensive line, and Georgia Tech was terrible defensively last season. Now they've revamped the coaching staff. They stocked up through the portal. But I think the primary question is whether the Yellow Jackets defense can hold up.
All right, good deal. Ed?
Well, David, thanks for coming on this morning. I got to back up real quick. I think I heard you say you went to Alaska, the far west, because Jill set it all up. Had you set it up, you might have went to your backyard, put up a couple lawn chairs, and hope everybody was happy with a cookout.
Actually, no, Ed. We went to Alaska at my request. Jill set it all up and got all the logistics. At the risk of TMI, I turned 65 this summer, and Jill said, "Where would you like to go that you haven't been?" And I was like, "Man, I want to go to Alaska. I want to be on a glacier." And that's exactly what we did. We took a helicopter, landed on a glacier, strapped some spikes on our hiking boots, and traipsed around a glacier. It was breathtaking and the experience of a lifetime.
That is tremendous. My point was this: without Jill, that trip might have not happened if you had to do all the planning, only because you're so involved with the college football and stuff. So hats off to Jill.
Oh, no question. She is a planner extraordinaire.
Okay. All right. Now let's jump back into football. I'm as excited too. Of course, everybody knows I'm basketball. I get excited during basketball season. But with football coming up, starting, I'm excited too. Now, I posed a question to Matt, and he went off this morning because he's a hater. I said, how are we in Dublin, Ireland, and the greatest football program of all time is not playing with Notre Dame not there? But I will let that go because they're not there. It is Georgia Tech, Florida State. I kind of look at it as I think Florida State wins this by 3 touchdowns at least. And my reasoning is Georgia Tech, yes, has revamped. Yes. They're traveling over there. Sure, it's Florida State, but Georgia Tech is still a little bit all over the place. And they're trying to get their foot down to say, okay, here we are. Florida State is coming off a year where they got to be a little angry that, hey, we got snubbed. Now, as a coach, all that raw motivation is nice, but once the game starts, you have to produce. You can't worry about all that other stuff. It's, protect the football and we have it, get the football and we don't. I think Florida State's a little bit further advanced. The big thing is what team will handle this travel the best in terms of distractions or whatever. And I think Florida State right now is a little bit more built for that. And I do agree Georgia Tech is better than what they were last year, but it's just a gut feeling. I just think Florida State's a 3-touchdown favorite in this game.
Florida State's much more talented, Ed, especially on the defensive side. The Seminoles front, you've got Patrick Payton and the Georgia transfer, Marvin Jones Jr., coming off the edge. You've got one of the best defensive tackles in the country in Joshua Farmer. They are really good there. They've got an experienced linebacker in DJ Lundy. They've got a set of cornerbacks, one of whom is a transfer from UVA, Fentrell Cypress. This is his second season in Tallahassee. And another one, Azariah Thomas, whom many project as a first-round NFL draft choice. The Noles could be absolutely filthy on defense. And is better or as improved as many anticipate Georgia Tech will be this season, it may not be reflected in the Jackets record because the schedule is so difficult, starting with today. And they'll bookend it with their traditional regular season finale against Georgia. But in between, they'll be playing Clemson, they'll be playing Notre Dame. And oh, by the way, Ed, you being a Fighting Irish guy, Notre Dame played in this game last year against Navy.
That's right. They can't do it every year, Ed, for crying out loud. We had Northwestern in Nebraska, was it 2 years ago, David? That was a pretty good game, actually. Surprising.
Well, the Northwestern-Nebraska game, while close, was a terrible display of football and probably turned the Irish off to the sport forever. And you'll recall Northwestern won, and that was their only win of the season. And then 3 weeks after losing that game, Nebraska pitched Scott Frost overboard.
Yeah. It had some drama, I guess, is what I was getting at. It wasn't a blowout.
Yes, the quality was a little lacking.
Agree. The quality wasn't upper crust, but we'll see next week with some of these big games. I want to get to that with you here in a moment with David Teel of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Paul, and this one, I got 2 questions I'll throw your way, even though I'm pretty sure I know what one of your answers will be here. Paul Feinbaum recently stated, and he of the SEC network at ESPN, and we know he is slanted towards the SEC here, so I'll put that disclaimer out here to begin with. He said, quote, there are really 2 conferences. The rest of them don't matter. They're literally playing for third place, in reference to the SEC and Big Ten as the big gorillas in the room here. So, number one, do you think he's right, David? And then furthermore, do you think a lot of the public, whether it's in our state or any portion of the country, north, south, east, west, middle America, feel that way?
Number one, I don't think Feinbaum's right. And the numbers don't prove him right. Now, is the SEC the behemoth in the room? 100%. That's what happens when you win national championships all the time. And that's what happens when you put multiple teams in the playoff consistently. But if you look at the decade-long history, man, of the 4-team playoff, ACC teams had a better record than Big Ten teams. ACC teams won as many national championships as Big Ten teams. So this notion that somehow the Big Ten is head and shoulders above the ACC, to me, is pure folly. And oh, by the way, last season, the ACC went 7-5 head up against the SEC. And including, Florida State got hosed. There's just no doubt in my mind. And in its regular season finale against Florida, playing its second string quarterback on the road in Gainesville, the Seminoles still win that game. Now, granted, the Gators were also using their second string quarterback, and it wasn't a terribly good Florida team. But Florida State beat Florida more convincingly than Washington beat Washington State, than Georgia beat Georgia Tech there on rivalry weekend. So, no, I don't agree with Feinbaum. Do I think folks around the country do? I think probably yes, because of all the attention that the conferences have received from their recent additions and expansions. Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, and then Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC to the Big Ten. But remind me, how many times did USC and UCLA get to the playoff?
Haven't happened yet, I don't believe. We have to go back to the Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart days that the Trojans were playing in big games.
Correct. So I'm not sure that it's all that. And, we'll see it proved out now with the 12-team playoff, which is going to be absolutely fascinating on so many levels. And I think part of the perception of the Big Ten and the SEC being miles ahead of the ACC is the television contracts and revenue. And that's partly our fault in the media, including me, because we spend so much of our time writing and talking about revenue and contracts rather than what actually goes on the field. And I'm not sure where that demarcation point was when we started to do that. But when we started to do it, fans started to get obsessed about it. More important, boards of trustees started to obsess about it. And that's why you have Florida State and Clemson, because of their dissatisfaction with the ACC's TV deal, suing to get out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to hit with you on the ACC right now, because that is your wheelhouse here. Which teams are in most need of a big season? I know you had an article recently in the Richmond Times-Dispatch sort of detailing this. And then which are most capable in your eyes of taking a big leap forward? And could one of them be in our own state with the Hokies, who are getting a lot of buzz right now under Brent Pry and making some inroads in recruiting?
They are, Matt, the Hokies, and deservedly so. Granted, a 7-6 season a year ago is not up to standards in Blacksburg, but I think it's the way they finished, winning 5 of their last 7, waxing Tulane in the Military Bowl. The big thing with Virginia Tech that they have to prove is, can they beat good teams? Now, Tulane was good during the regular season, but was decimated for the bowl, was playing under an interim coach. We saw what that did to Virginia Tech in the Pinstripe Bowl against Maryland a few years ago, when they got just absolutely hammered. You have no personnel, your coaching staff's in disarray. So I kind of discount the Tulane game. Last season, the Hokies went 5-3 in the ACC. Those 5 wins were over the bottom 5 teams in the standings. And the 3 teams they lost to, Florida State, Louisville, and NC State, were the top 3 teams in the league. So the Hokies need to prove they can beat quality opposition. Now, the story you're referring to is one where I posited that the ACC's top brands are clearly Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and Virginia Tech. And they've never really had a season where 3 or all 4 of them simultaneously had really good years. And that's what the ACC desperately needs. It can't afford to become a one-bid league in this new expanded playoff. It needs to become a multi-bid league on a consistent basis. That's the only way to change the narrative, and it's the only way to get more money out of the CFP television deal.
David, looking at the 12-team playoff and getting back to this you got the two dominant conferences, which I kind of believe, and I'm blaming it on you guys in the media because that's who you talked about, as you said. But correct me if I'm wrong, the playoff positioning is already set. In other words, I know what's going to come up. SEC people are going to say our number 5 is better than ACC 2 or Conference USA number 1. All that kind of talk is going to start coming up. And to me, you can't have a true playoff unless you conclude all the champions of Division I conferences. They have to be in there. And you've got to be careful taking below number 3, 4, 5. You start taking those teams because what you're essentially saying is SEC is better than everybody else, so we have to go deep into the playoff. Tell me about all that.
Well, the way it works now, Ed, is all 9 FBS conferences do not have a guaranteed bid to the playoff. The way it's going to work is the top 5 rated conference champions are guaranteed a bid, and then they will take the next 7 as at-larges, regardless of conference affiliation. So what this does is it guarantees the highest rated group of 5 champion a bid to the playoff, which is historic. You know, in the 10-year history of the 4-team playoff, the only G5 team to make it was Cincinnati when it won the AAC in 2021 and was undefeated. Now the Bearcats have since moved up to the Power Club in the Big 12. But a year ago, had the 12-team playoff been in effect, Liberty would have played at Florida State in the first round of the CFP.
Wow. And I've even seen Brett McMurphy, David. I'm sure you have too, in his projected bracket. He's got like Texas State as his 12 seed to crash the party out of the Sun Belt. So it makes me laugh, also smile, and it's something that's neat and unique. And I think it puts a little more eyeballs on some of these games that ordinarily would not have those eyeballs on them because of the stakes.
Oh, absolutely, Matt. You know, the Power Conference championship games, the first Saturday in December, you're playing essentially for an automatic bid. Yeah. And then you've got the G5 championship games. All those teams are thinking, you know, can we be the highest ranked G5 champion and get into that playoff and have our moment in the sun and maybe pull a Boise State Fiesta Bowl type upset where you really get yourself on the map, and it's just not a one-hit wonder, because then you advance and play again in a major bowl in the quarterfinals. So it's going to be fascinating. And the great thing about the first round games is they're going to be on campus. And I really hope that eventually the CFP will put the quarterfinals on campus as well, so the top 4 seeds can get a home game. Because right now, yes, you get a bye if you're a top 4 seed, but you can't get a home game. Everything is neutral.
So yet it makes it easier for your Irish, even if they get 3 or 4 losses, to make the playoff now.
True, but we're not going to get 3 or 4 losses. We'll probably have 1 or 2. But I David, my thing is, and I look at it from a coaching perspective, the smaller conference teams, and we have this argument in basketball every year, how are they ever going to get the notoriety unless they join the big boys? And now you got 30 teams in a conference to say, okay, we won our conference, but yet number 5 in the SEC gets in because they have a stronger rating. Even though on paper we see, and I'll just throw a team out there. Yes, Oklahoma had a heck of a schedule. And if they were in the Sun Belt, they would go undefeated and win by 50. But you can't use that kind of talk. You have to go by reality as to what happened. And I don't like it as a coach to see a team that's really done. You mentioned like Liberty had a great year. And then last year they would have been rewarded with first round game at Florida. I think you said Florida State.
Florida State.
So it'd be like, okay, wow. But at least they're in. I think under this situation, you're going to get 1 or 2 really good lower level teams, G5, whatever, are not going to get in. And people are just going to say, oh, well, that's the way it is because you've got to feed the big boys. And to me, again, I just think personally that's for those teams, I don't think it's right.
No, it is difficult, but I think the group of 5 administrators, commissioners, athletic directors, they're pleased to at least have the guaranteed access of one team. And the suspicion is, and I think it's a very accurate one, is if, say, last season, Liberty was number 23 in the final CFP rankings, and they would have displaced in the playoff number 12, Oklahoma. That's not going to fly for very long with the power conference brokers. Now, the good news for the group of 5 is the previous 9 years of the playoff, at least one group of 5 champion was in the top 20 and oftentimes in the top 15. You'll remember a Memphis team, a couple of Central Florida teams, a Western Michigan squad. That's what the group of 5 really needs to hope for, is someone, be it a Texas State, be it a James Madison, be it a Liberty, runs the table and is among those top 15 where folks don't say, oh, there's no way they belong. But if they're in the top 15, then you can make the argument, okay, yeah, we're giving them a spot in a 12-team playoff, but it's not that much of a reach. But if the top G5 champion isn't even in the top 25 for a couple of years, that automatic access is going to go away.
Interesting. In our last couple of minutes here with the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer David Teel of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Check out his work online. You can follow him at @ByDavidTeel on X or Twitter. Also, richmond.com here, and we'll get David on during the season. I know he'll be a busy man traveling all over the globe, if you will, covering some of these games in the ACC involving the Hokies and the Who's and many other teams around the sport of college football. And you sort of touched on it, David. We'll get some quick idle thoughts to get you to close here before we take a break you touched on the Hokies, but the Who's, your read on them this year. Some feel they could be improved roster-wise, but it may not show in the win-loss record. I know you had a piece in the paper on Old Dominion, in fact, a couple of Richmond products in Chris Trinidad and Isaiah Page, they of LC Bird and Verona High School. You're feeling the Monarchs, and also a place I know you bleed some purple and gold like my pops. JMU's got a new head coach. They really transitioned well from FCS to FBS. They have a new head coach in Bob Chesney from Holy Cross, taking over for Kurt Signetti, who's going to Indiana. You're feeling the Dukes of JMU, the Monarchs of ODU, and the Cavaliers of UVA. What kind of seasons the fan bases can expect from those squads in your eyes?
I think among those 3, Matt, James Madison is best positioned, and I don't say that because I graduated from there many, many moons ago. But even with rampant turnover on the roster due to transfers out after Kurt Signetti departed for Indiana, JMU's got some pieces. They went and got Dylan Morris from Washington out of the portal at quarterback. They added a couple of very good running backs, including George Pettaway from North Carolina, coming home to his Virginia roots. You know him well from his time in high school ball over in Suffolk. And I think JMU is in position to contend in the Sun Belt East. Old Dominion was so fascinating last year. I don't think any college football team in America played more one-score games than the Monarchs. 11 of 13 guys, including all 8 league games, were decided by 7 points or fewer. That's remarkable. And the Monarchs, gained bowl eligibility in the regular season finale against Georgia State, then lost to Western Kentucky in their postseason game. So they finished 6-7. They've got Grant Wilson back at quarterback. They've got some other pieces. They took some transfer hits at running back, but that non-conference schedule, ouch. South Carolina, East Carolina, Virginia Tech, Bowling Green. If the Monarchs can get out of there with a win or two, I think you feel a lot better about them. And Matt, I agree with your assessment of Virginia. Better, yes, but will it be reflected in the record? because the schedule is so dicey, particularly the back half. You've got road games in the second half of the season at Clemson, Notre Dame, and Virginia Tech. That is a rough stretch, guys. And that's what makes, say, week 2 for the Cavaliers at Wake Forest so essential. Got to get a game like that. And then the following week at home against Maryland. Those are 2 winnable games, but also games you could lose. And if you lose those 2 and combine it with the back half of the schedule, it's difficult to envision the Cavaliers getting to that 6-win bowl threshold. But we still don't know who the quarterback is. Is it Anthony Calandria? Is it Tony Muskett? I think there's more upside with Calandria, the sophomore, maybe a little more security with Muskett, the seasoned veteran.
Yeah, a lot of unanswered questions still, but we'll be finding out more as we'll kick things off with a whole bunch of teams. Next week, college football underway, and we're so excited. And we say congrats again to the Virginia Sports Writer of the Year. He's got more of those now, I think, than Bob Costas has Emmys. David Teel of the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll get you back on throughout your travels, and we love having you on the program. We might even test out our question option now where we have some fans that can interact with you and throw some questions your way via YouTube, Facebook, and all the social platforms. Be well, and we'll talk again down the road.
Sounds great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Thanks, David.
That is the one and only David Teel with us here on 757 Saturday Sports Talk here on Cova Sports TV. Coming up,